Here we go. Yay! Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fialka. Today is Feb 8, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything, for helping us. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with Shane Guffogg. Is that right, Shane?
That's correct. Yes. Thank you.
Shane, where are you calling in from?
I am calling from my ranch. It's in Central California, and I'm actually in my studio here, which you can see behind me. Yeah.
I recommend people see Eric Swenson's film on you on YouTube because you get a whole tour of your farm and your studio. So we'll just jump right into it. What's the best thing for a human being?
Getting enough sleep.
Oh, I like that. Is there a secret? How does someone do that?
You know what? I think that it's, for me anyway, I just have to stay physical all day. I'm a very physical person. These paintings that I make are big paintings, so they take a lot of energy for me to do. But if I'd stay in my studio all day long just making paintings, I'll go a little cuckoo. So I like to go for walks. I work out in my orchard a lot. I go out there and hoe weeds, just simple things like that. So for me, it's all about a balance.
I like that, Shane. And what's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
That's a very, very good question. I think visual. I'm a very visual person, but also sound, and I hear my paintings as much as I see them.
Nice.
When I'm listening to music, I see the colors.
Yeah.
And I just assumed everybody was like that, but then I found out no, that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a couple things there. It's called synesthesia, where and it's also what McLuhan called sense ratio shifting. So you go into an art museum and your eye is the dominant sense, but everybody hears the hum in the art museum too, and that's part of it. It's like either the air conditioning going or people rustling and
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, you go to the Louvre Museum, for instance, and go into the room where the Mona Lisa is and just record the sound. And it's this white noise sound of people whispering and shuffling. Yeah.
Beautiful. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
As a means of making their lives meaningful.
Do you think? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, well, I just think that we're wired to gather information so that we can make sense of our own lives, our own existence.
Yeah. Well, no, you anticipate the next question perfectly. Is that need or want more innate or more invented to collect information?
I think it's innate, and I think that we invent ways to collect it, but I think the need is there. I think that we're hardwired for that. And I think that, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I think that, we create because we've been created. We have a need to reproduce. We have a need to create. We have a need to, when I make paintings, I'm painting things that I need to see that don't exist.
Yeah. No, that's a great line. We create because we have been created. I like that. Do thoughts create emotions?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that they are almost one and the same. And I think that thoughts can influence emotions, and emotions certainly can influence thoughts. So if you're thinking about somebody who's meaningful in your life, then your emotions are going to be happy, hopefully.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that it's two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. Is thinking more innate or more invented?
I think therefore I am. It's one of my favorite quotes.
Yeah, I like
And
that.
yes, I think that they're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah,
That it's we need to think as a means of justifying our existence.
yeah. Can humans think without language?
Yes. Well, that's a really interesting question because when I went to Cal Arts and I did all that, conceptual art school stuff. And when I was there was no painting classes, there was no drawing class. It was all about very, very conceptual. Appropriation was the big word at the time. And I felt like it just was lacking something profound for me. And I thought, when I go and stand in front of a great work of art, I feel things that I can't even describe. So what is that moment, right? And so then I started thinking about I needed to get back to an origin within my own self in order to restart the machinery about why I wanted to make art. And so one thing that came to my mind was, what do our thoughts look like before we attach language? What is that spark of a moment? Because a baby is thinking, but they don't have language.
Yeah. And then they scribble their first drawings and it's like smeared all the colors together, and then the parent feels obliged. I've got to put this on my refrigerator. It
Yes,
doesn't
yes.
look, it doesn't matter how, aesthetically it's not pleasing. That child made it.
Right. Well, and that's one of my earliest memories is drawing like that with my mother. And so I would scribble and draw, and then I would ask her if I'd written anything. So she would point out, well, that's an E, and that could be an S. So I realized that I was tapping into this very subconscious alphabet of sorts, where a need to connect dots, basically, from the interior to the exterior.
Yeah,
So
it's
that
interesting.
that memory has always really been prevalent for me. And
Yeah.
and I think that when I make these paintings, sometimes these gestural marks that I make are very much about that initial memory of drawing with my mom.
Wow. It's also, you touched on this. We can't separate, like, the question I'll ask you first, and then I'll tell you. Are humans more feeling beings or more thinking beings? I know it's both and it depends, but just your inclination, your hunch.
I think right now they're more thinking, and I think that by thinking I think there's too much overthinking, and that the emotions aren't being addressed.
Yeah.
So the overthinking is creating states of fear, when the fear is not really necessarily a valid emotion to be having unless you're overthinking something. You know what I mean? And so that I just feel like there's so much of that going on right now. It's like, boy,
Yeah.
if everybody could just stop and turn the mind off and just get recentered, a
Yeah.
lot of the fears would just go away.
Yeah. Yeah, the two quotes I love are, the Marx Brothers are in a jam and they said, "We got to think." And the other one says, "No, we already tried that." And then, and then
Exactly.
Cap, and then Captain Beefheart, who was actually a great painter too, he said,
Mm-hmm.
"I've had too much to think."
Mm-hmm.
But
Exactly.
but but where I was going for a second was, you can't separate feeling and thought, but literally, but you can, because we invented the words. So most of the time when I say, are we more feeling or more thinking, 85%, 90% of people go, well, we're more feeling
Mm-hmm.
creatures,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and they say it this way. They go, I think we're more feeling creatures.
Exactly.
And then my friend mocks it. He goes, I feel we're more thinking creatures.
I just think, when I come into my studio to paint, the first thing I try to do is empty myself of all thought.
Yeah.
And I do that through music. I'll put on Indian raga music or classical music. And so it opens up it clears out my mind. And it just like there's this connection that happens. And then as I start making marks on the canvas, I begin to like move forward onto the canvas, and the canvas begins to come back and meet me halfway.
Yeah.
And so there's this beautiful dance that begins to take place. But it's all about me just getting out of my own way.
It's amazing. You're touching on a lot of the themes we're going to delve into, and it's also reminds me of Bridget Bardot says, "I don't think when I make love." And it's like, good luck. How can you turn your brain off ever? Like you say, well, I try to, and you use the music, but people who meditate, it's like, okay, think about not thinking,
Mhm.
and it's like, it is a conscious thing, but how about this? Fill in the blank, Shane. I don't know what I think until I.
Well, that's a good one. I don't know what I think until I recognize the moment that I'm in.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the moment's it's just like a stream of water that's rushing by us all the time. And if you're just recognizing the stream that's going by, you're not seeing the leaf that's riding on top of the stream. But
What's another word? Yeah. What's another word for recognize? What would you, suss out that word recognize a little until I recognize.
It's a conscious awareness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chomsky said that language is not just words. It's culture, it's tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work?
I paint, but other people create war.
Yeah.
I make art.
That's good.
Yeah. I
Two
just make art.
questions. Yeah, well, just as that's fine. That's enough, man. Just as good. Yeah, make art is great. Alan Turing asked two questions in 1950. Is thinking a function of the soul?
That's a really profound question. And the soul, the idea of the soul, I've been thinking about that a lot lately. Thinking about it's almost like the invisible tethers that I feel are attached to my being that goes out into around the world, to times and places, not necessarily this moment, but throughout time. And repeat that question again. I lost my train of thought.
That's all right. Is thinking a function of the soul?
I think the soul is what manifests our physicality, which is then what creates our ability to think. But here's another thought. So we are created, our consciousness is created so that we can consciously be aware of our soul.
Yeah. You anticipated a good question, but I got to ask the second Turing question, then we'll go into it. Can machines think?
No, they can process data. They cannot think.
Yeah. So the question you anticipated, thank you, Shane, is does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
And I think it's almost a perpetual motion. where it's like the universe. We know that there's black space. We know that there's objects within this space, and we know that there's vast amounts of space where we don't know what's there, right? But they're both existing simultaneously. And I think that there's a Mayan word that I named a series of paintings after called Kanak, C-A-N-N-A-C. So, and what it essentially means is that the spirit cannot exist without form, nor form without spirit. So there's always this duality that's required in nature, in the universe. You can't have just one thing. It's got to be two things. So the consciousness and the soul, I think, are part of that duality.
You know, I really explore form and content a lot. So you said spirit and form there.
Mm-hmm.
What's another word for spirit? You know, your form is you use the canvas and paints.
Mm-hmm. I think a spirit as in energy, as in thought, because thoughts
Right.
are energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like energy. That's the energy word helped a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you more pursue meaning or more pursue happiness?
That's a good one. I think happiness, but I think that to recognize happiness, I have to pursue meaning.
Yeah. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Speed of thought.
There's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right.
Well, the speed of light is 186,000 miles per second.
Is it really good?
Yes, it's 186,000 miles per second. So Einstein's theories of relativity, E equals mc squared, is basically energy is equal to the mass of an object multiplied by the speed of light, which is 186,000 miles per second squared. And that is the formula that unlocked the universe and brought us into the 20th century with the nuclear bomb. Because he recognized that there is an infinite amount of energy that's required to keep the universe together.
Yeah.
So how do you measure that? I mean, where did this guy come from? It's just profound. And he's doing this without a calculator. He's doing this without a computer. He's scribbling on a chalkboard. That's just, I think about that and it's so humbling.
Yeah. Audre Lorde, the poet, says you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded and said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest? And just to give you some context, just because I asked these questions and do a cute quote before it doesn't mean you have to apply the quote. It's you put all the questions into the context you want.
Okay. That's read it to me again.
Yeah. You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. And then Yvonne Rainer said you can if you expose the tools. And then I asked, what new tool do you suggest?
A different perspective.
Yeah.
You're keeping me on my toes. This is good.
What new toy do you suggest?
What new toy? New toy? I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not all that into like the physical things of life so much. They don't matter to me as much as they used to. Yeah. As I get older, so the toys just kind of disappear.
Exactly. Yeah, from watching that movie on you, it's like all you need is a fruit tree and a paintbrush,
That's
like
it.
hello. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Sleeping through the night.
Oh, nice.
So, of course, what do? I wake up at 2:30 or 3 o'clock. I try to tell myself, do not wake up at 2:30. So then I wake up. I wake up at 3:30. I realized a long time ago, thankfully, that worrying doesn't solve anything. It just creates more worry.
Yeah.
So I let go of worry. It doesn't solve it. It just, again, it adds more negativity. So then I'm not going to sleep if I'm in a negative state of mind.
Yeah.
If I've had a really productive day in my studio or working around the ranch, or sometimes business meetings, I have also a place in Los Angeles, and so I go to LA every month, and my studio manager, Victoria, she sets up meetings so that I pop in. We'll have a meeting at noon, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, dinner at 6 o'clock. The next day, meeting at 9 a.m., 12 afternoon, 2 a.m., another dinner, and then I'm out. So I try to utilize my time the best I can. And sometimes there's something about, like Los Angeles, it has its own energy. And I have studios there in Hollywood, and I moved there little over 30 years ago. And it was a pretty rough neighborhood. And the traffic, the theft, the crime that was going on, you took your hands into your own life every time you walked on the sidewalk. And at the time I thought, this is exciting for me because I haven't really ever been exposed to this part of humanity. And growing up in a very rural area, it was very abstract to me. So I thought, I'm going to make art here as long as it feeds me. The energy feeds me. Well, about 3 years ago, it stopped feeding me. And I started really struggling to make art there. And there was just too much noise. There's too many distractions. So then I realized for myself that, art making is a very spiritual practice to me. Art making for me is a form of meditation. Every painting is me exploring the silence within. And so that was a great counter to the energy of LA. But the energy of LA just got to be louder and louder and louder to where it started drowning out the silence within me. So that's when I shifted. And the studio I'm in now, I started building it 12 years ago, anticipating that this was going to happen. Yeah.
It's really well put. So Marshall McLuhan learned from the poet Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so that we can cope with them. Just like, you were somehow a channel or a vehicle for these noise of Hollywood, and it was coming through you, and you were like, okay, I've had enough of this being the vehicle for this noise. Now I want to explore silence. And so McLuhan's main question I ask you is, why do humans ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though we can turn to the artist to reveal them to us?
What came to mind just now was a magician who's showing you something in one hand, but he's doing something else in the other hand. And the first hand is a distraction for the trick.
Yeah.
And I think we're constantly being distracted from our true self by the noise, by the news, by the toys.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. It's funny because
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I always thought of artists as shamans.
Yeah.
Whether you're a painter or a dancer or a musician or a filmmaker or a writer, and it's our job is to take these journeys within, and then bring back our findings and present them through whatever medium, because most people don't have the time, or they're not wired to delve into those places and come out intact. And, so when we go to watch a great film, we have an emotional experience, and that is the job of the filmmakers and the writer and the actors to all work together to give us that experience, which then makes us reevaluate our lives, hopefully for the better.
Do artists have a moral obligation?
Yes, absolutely. I think not only a moral obligation, I think it's a responsibility.
Yeah.
To all of the human race.
Are you more afraid of old ideas or more afraid of new ideas?
Neither. The new ones often are being fed by the old ones.
Yeah.
And they, in the mind, it may be a new idea today, but it's already been a past idea that maybe I've forgotten about and stored it away, knowing that at some point in time, the right moment will come for this idea to then begin to grow. There's a painting behind me here that I first started with this idea in 1989. And I piddled around with it for about a year, then I put it away. And I thought it's an interesting idea, but I'm not ready for it yet. I'm not there yet. I don't know what to do with this idea. I haven't grown into it yet.
So it's a true art form just to recognize that.
Yes.
It's discerning. Sure. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
Yeah, it was drawing and trying to write the alphabet of my mind.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
That's a good one. I think it's a blessing. And I also think that our brains work in a very similar way as computers, which is that as we save information on our computers, and it gets stacked up in different folders. And then it gets to a point where you have to defragment your computer because you've got stuff all over the place, right? So you have to condense it. And our brains automatically do that. So our memories, as time goes on, get fused with other memories. And they become memories of memories. And I did a whole series of paintings on those my last semester at Cal Arts. And these memories of memories, because I traveled to New York doing an internship. And then after New York, I went to Greece for a month, and I built a little bamboo hut underneath a tree on an island just to meditate and kind of get myself back in alignment. And while there, I started thinking about the people and the places and the imagery that was in my mind, and thinking, why are those images sticking out more than other images? Why are these events more prevalent in my mind than other events, right? So then I realized that it was a selective sort of databasing that my brain was doing. And that by doing this, it was creating new imagery, new memories that never really happened. Yeah. And so that was quite fascinating for me to explore through paint. But it was a beginning of me tapping into the mind, and how does the mind work? Why does the mind work the way it does? And these were very representational paintings. And then I thought, well, I didn't want to tell stories anymore. I wanted the paintings to be more pure. But I also didn't want to abandon figurative painting totally. So then I realized that my body is the figure. So my act of making a mark becomes a figurative painting. So these things are done in a very spontaneous subconscious moment. But then I would step back and look at this moment and then consciously have a visual conversation with these moments. And so that they then become real images. So it's a way of creating like memories of memories.
Yeah. No, I like that layer, and you're so articulate, Shane. I appreciate it. It really evoked. Wyndham Lewis said, "Artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future."
That's great. Perfect.
So
Wish
tell
I
me,
had said that.
yeah. So tell me, pretty good for a sort of like fascist great artist, but he was a deep thinker, and it's important what he said, because I think you have that sense. We're trying to live in the moment,
Yes.
and just the memory of a memory is so, it really helps suss out this challenge we have. McLuhan also called it rear view mirrorism, because we all
Mhm.
go walking forward, always looking into the rear view mirror, like, whoa, yeah.
Right. So you
Like,
have yeah, it's a
yeah,
dichotomy. We have two opposites that are existing simultaneously. And I think
yeah,
that's true with our bodies and our mind. They're two different entities, but one, it can't hardly exist without the other, but yet they're separate.
yeah. So you touched on your mom, but the question is basically, tell me someone within your immediate family and then outside your immediate family who had an impact on you, was like a role model, and what specific was that influence? Just briefly.
Okay. My mother was very influential in me being creative, and she would sit and draw with me. So that was a great thing. My father, my mother was a Los Angelino. My father was from Northern England, no education, went to work in the coal mines at the age of 15. I don't think he's ever read a book. I don't think my mother ever read a book. They're both passed away now, but my father, what he did know was how to work hard.
Yeah.
So between the two of them, I've got this this combination of sensitivity, creativity, and a work ethic, right?
Yeah.
And then in terms of my professional career, I would have to say Ed Ruscha.
Yeah.
And Ed is he's a good friend. And I met Ed in 1989 and started working for him as a studio assistant. And the nice thing is that he and I are very similar in terms of our work ethic. So we got along in that way. Now his approach to art making is very, very different from mine. And that was a good thing. So I wasn't influenced by him artistically. Because sometimes you watch when an artist goes to work for another artist, they just get kind of consumed by the other artist's process or creativity. But he's very analytical with his art making process, and I'm very spontaneous. We very, very, very different approaches to art making, but he shows up in his studio every day at 8:30 in the morning and stays until 7 o'clock at night every day, 7 days a week. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. As do
How
I.
cool. Yeah. How cool is that? So did your parents raise you a particular religion?
No, not at all. I did go to church. I mean, they did send me to Bible camp, and that was a big disaster for me because I noticed that the girls weren't in when we would have to go and have breakfast, the girls weren't there. So I thought, I wonder where. Well, they were in their cabins, getting ready to come. And so we were kept separate. So I decided to go and see what they were up to. And of course, I got busted and got swats. And so that was not good. But no religion per se. If anything, my father was an atheist, I think. They were both raised. My mother was raised to Christian Science. My father was a Salvation Army person, whatever, in England. So they both kind of rejected religion as they got older, and it just didn't seemed to fit for them. And we would have talks about it when I was an adult. And I grew up in a very Bible Belt area. So I was never good at just accepting somebody saying, well, God did this and God did that. And I said, well, how do you know? Just because it's written down in this book, well, where did the book originate from? And when was it originally written? And how many times has it been translated? And how many empires have fallen and risen? And, you know, all these things that play into this. So I'm never one to just accept stuff like that on the surface at all. And then I realized that, you know, somebody said, well, you're an atheist. I said, no, I'm not an atheist. They said, well, do you believe in God? And I said, to the best of my ability. But if you're talking about infinity, if you're talking about omnipotence, if you're talking about something that knows all things at all times, then we're talking about something that is beyond our capacity to comprehend. We're just not capable of it. We're not wired that way. We have governors in our brain. So I realized that I'm just not smart enough to fully comprehend the concept of God. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. What's that?
Do you pray?
No, I don't. I don't. I do have, you know what for me is prayer is coming into my studio and painting or walking through my orchard. Yeah. And I was out there today and there's little blossoms starting to bud out. And I think that is just spectacular. You know, it's like, how does this happen? But it's beautiful. And it happens every spring. And there's a genetic code that's in these trees that tell it what to do based on the sun and the alignment of the sun and how the rays of the sun are hitting the planet and so on and so forth. So these are things that, because if these things weren't happening, that wouldn't happen. But we don't think about that, and neither do they. It just is.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Good job.
Very good. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
That's a good one. I think of the word evil as if you spell live backwards.
That's indeed what it is.
Yes. And so it is life that is not flowing in the right direction. You know, it's the energy of life flowing backwards. And the original, I think it's Latin, I can't remember, but I think the original definition of Satan means to struggle within.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how do you
have Satan if you're struggling within? And that means that you have evil because the energy in your body is not flowing in the right direction. Then you're going to end up at dis-ease within yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, most people say everybody's capable of evil.
Right.
We're capable. But how do you, Shane, advise someone to deal with an enemy? And this one I'll set up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK says, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I think there's some truth to that. But it depends on how the enemy is being acknowledged. If your enemy is being acknowledged from a place of fear, then the enemy is empowered. If you're acknowledging from a place of strength, then they're not being empowered.
Yeah. Good. But how would you, like, if one of your kids came and they says, I have an enemy, how would you advise them to deal with the enemy?
I would ask why they're being perceived as an enemy. What have they done? to quantify that definition? And what did you do to provoke that exchange? And then say, okay, so now let's say you're in part responsible for this. How are you going to fix your part in this situation?
Yeah.
I never think it's one-sided.
Yeah.
It takes two to dance.
Indeed. Very well done. And James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin about 100 years ago. He had a cinema, Volta Cinema, and he basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
I think, again, we go back to what I was saying about the shaman. So the actors, a writer is writing about, usually there's archetypes that personify different aspects of life within people. And so a great writer is going to tap into that. And then they're going to put it into a different context so that we as the audience can recognize ourselves.
Yeah. What was the tipping point for you, Shane, to say, I want my career, my calling to be a painter? And, I know you talked about in the film about raising birds too. I mean, like, just briefly walk us through your career where it was like, okay, you're doing this with your mom, and she's acknowledging you putting these gestures on paper and giving you, and I mean, did they take you to art museums and show you what art was growing up?
No.
And so like, walk me through the tipping. Yeah.
So I was always drawing, and I would set up my GI Joes into these historical battle scenes and draw them, creating my own narrative, right? And I would spend like 2 weeks working on one of these drawings, to where my dad would get very upset because by this point I'd taken over the living room with all my GI Joes. Cut to in first grade, and then we had the neighbors had horses, so I would go out in the field and sketch the horses, and I'm talking, I'm 5, 6 years old. And then in first grade, it's a very strange thing, but we were asked to draw a self-portrait, taking a bath or a shower in first grade in the little town of Lindsay, California. And I drew myself in the shower with the curtain open, completely nude. And I drew all the tiles on the wall in the shower. And I spent a lot of time on this drawing. So, of course, everybody is, my parents were kind of like baffled by it. And how did I know how to do this? And where's this ability coming from? And my dad would make jokes that, I must have been the milkman, can't be his son, stuff like that. Because he would say, the only thing I could draw is my breath. So, and I remember turning it in, and some of the other kids saw it, and everybody said, oh, you're going to be in big trouble. You can't draw yourself like that. Then the next thing I know, the teacher, Mrs. Cowper, she takes my drawing down to the principal's office. And then 15, 20 minutes later, the speaker in the room crackles and says, Mrs. Cowper, would you please bring Shane Guffogg to the office? And everybody's like, oh, you're in big trouble. So I take the drawing down there, and there's my drawing sitting on his desk. And I'm, about ready to pee my pants. I'm so afraid. And he said, you're not in trouble. I just want to know who helped you with this drawing. I said, nobody. He said, a sister or brother? I said, I'm an only child. Your mother, your father? I said, no. So then they called my parents in for a meeting, and which my dad wasn't happy with because he had to take time off of work, and he was a real blue collar kind of guy. So we go in, and the principal said, did your son do this? And my dad said, yes. Drives me nuts. He said, he won't stop drawing. I want him to sit with me and watch Bonanza or Gunsmoke, and he won't do it. He just wants to draw. And so they said, well, you have a very sensitive child. You have a gifted child. What are you doing at home to help him? And, you know, my parents were just baffled by it all. So my first grade teacher, and my dad, he and I, before he passed away, we talked about this. Because in my memory, she came over once a month for dinner. And he said, no, she came over every week for dinner. And so she would, not to see what I was doing, but to see what my parents were doing, how they were handling it. So from that time on, in second grade and third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, the teachers, the homeroom teachers would call my parents in privately to see what I had done over the summer. So they knew kind of how to deal with me. And then we moved to the neighboring town where we bought the bird farm, and I was going to a different school, and I realized that I wasn't known by anybody, and I could just be normal. Because in the other school, I was always known as being this kid who could draw well, you know, and so I get picked on sometimes and things like that. So when we moved here, I just wanted to play football and be like everybody else, and I didn't want to draw anymore. Which made my mom upset. But then in high school, my freshman year, my mom said, okay, you can play football, but you have to take an art class. Okay. So the teacher gave some assignment, and it was the dumbest assignment. I wasn't going to do it. And instead, I drew the hair of the girl sitting in front of me in great detail. And at the end of the class, he took my drawing away. He said, this wasn't the assignment. Oh, well. Well, what he did was then he went and had it framed and he put it into an art show, and I won first prize. So then he said, I knew it. And then he left after that year, and another teacher came, who I'm still very good friends with. He's probably watching it right now. And he, after about 2 weeks, and it was his first time teaching, he just got out of college. So after about 2 weeks, he called me into his office and said, I don't quite know what to do with you. You're way beyond anywhere I'll ever be. What would you like to do? And I said, well, I don't know enough about art history. So if you could give me some artists to look up and to study, and then I would like to create my own curriculum and have you critique it for me. So we did that all 3 years, and it was fantastic. And then I saved up my money all through high school. And the day after graduating from high school, I went to Europe with a friend of mine who I talked into joining me, who's also probably watching us right now. And we had our backpacks and sleeping bags and a Euro pass. And my objective was to go to every great museum and see every great painting I could see, because I'd never been to a museum before. So I'm 17 years old. We walk into the London National Gallery, and I'm standing in front of the second to last self-portrait of Rembrandt. And it was like something just opened up in my brain, and everything was just being downloaded. And I could see every brushstroke. I could see every color. I could see exactly how he made the painting. And I said to my friend, my dog's wanting my attention. I said to my friend, I said, I was explaining, I said, you see this, right? And he just looked at me and goes, no. You see it. And I see you seeing it, and I don't see it. So that was a big moment for me, and I realized that this is something that is tangible.
Yeah.
And then about a month later, we were in Milan, and I really wanted to see The Last Supper. So we walked in there, and this is before the Dan Brown novel. And we walked in there, and there was one little guard in there asleep with his Uzi on his lap, and nobody else was there. So I decided I was going to spend the afternoon and pretend that I was Leonardo da Vinci, and I had come back because I'd been summoned back to finish this painting. So I needed to figure out what this painting needed to get finished. And I was so bold as to, I pressed my whole body against the wall. And my friend was just about having a heart attack, thinking that this guy's going to wake up. He's going to shoot me. He's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I said, I need to feel the energy of this wall. And so that moment, I think it was probably in July of 1980, and I'm 17 years old. That was it. I knew who I was for sure.
Yeah. Then when you enter Cal Arts, how much period of time went from there to Cal Arts?
I went to a local junior college first, and
I see.
And
you studied art there?
Yes, I did. I studied art history mainly and some drawing classes. I've never had a painting class, and nice. I didn't want to have a painting class. I felt that organically I needed to find it on my own. Yeah. So, and then I realized probably around 19, I was learning more from my paintings than I was from the classes that I was in. Yeah. And the paintings were teaching me how to see everything around me. Yeah. And suddenly I was looking at leaves on the fruit trees in a different way. I was looking I was looking at them not as a leaf, but as a shape, as a color. Yeah. And so my brain, it was like reactivated to think and look in a different way. So I just kind of stopped taking classes. I would take one class, like an art history class, and this went on for about 3 years. And then they sent me a letter saying, "Hey, you're almost eligible to graduate. You need to take these 4 classes." And I thought, well, I may as well do that. I didn't know anything about the art world at all. And so as I'm taking these courses, I was making a big 28-foot long painting at the time, and I'm 19. And I had my teacher come to look at it from the college, and he just said, "You need to get out of here. You need to go away." And I said, "What?" He said, "Go to that Mickey Mouse school or something." Said, yeah. That kind of offended me. I didn't know what he was talking about. You know, I didn't know that Walt Disney had founded Cal Arts, right? So anyway, and then I heard of an artist a few months later who had purchased a ranch up in the foothills, and I got his number and I called him up and I asked if I could come and meet him. And I did. He said yes. And so his name is Joe Good. And I went up to meet him and I took my slides and he said, "Yeah, man, yeah. He said, you need to get out of here." And I said, "Well, and do what?" And he said, "You should go to an art college." And I said, "I'm not very good at somebody telling me what to do. I'm just not." And they said, "That's all right." He said, "You should go to Cal Arts." I said, "I went there. Ed Richey went there. There's a bunch of us that went there." So I said, "Thank you very much." And I got home and I called and I set up an appointment to go do a tour of the school, which I did. And it felt right. And I said, "What do I need to do?" They said, "Put together a set of 12 slides and write a statement and send it in. And we'll get back to you." It's the only school I applied to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, pretty amazing. Let's go on, because we could stay on that for quite a while, the rest of your career. But I want to get to these other questions, and you will be able to fill in. It's really well put. It's really beautiful how you said that. But I want to tell you these 3 cute lines before I ask you the punchline question, because you evoke so much in what you were saying there, Shane. The kid finds out that his dad has a job and he goes to work and he does something and gets paid. And his dad's an art teacher. And so the kid goes up to his dad and he goes, "Dad, what do you do for your job?" He goes, "I teach people how to draw." He goes, "You mean they forgot?"
That's right.
The other one, the Picasso is painting Guernica. He's finishing Guernica in his studio, and the German government official walks into his studio and he looks
Mhm.
at Guernica and he says to Picasso, "Did you do that?" And Picasso went, "No, you did."
Yes, that's right.
You know that one. But I don't
Yes.
know if you know this one. Either Monet or Cézanne said, if you paint your painting and you put it in the bushes and it blends in, it's a good painting.
That's a good one. That's probably Monet.
You
I would think
probably
that.
Monet, yeah. So, anyways, here's the punchline question. I mean, so it's I'm going to double the question because your theory of where did you get that? Is it in your DNA or you had some like uh lightning bolt hit you in your
Mhm.
mom's womb? Like, how did that happen to you? What's your theory or your thoughts? Because it's evident your parents didn't take you to art museums and then you learned. I mean, you say in the movie you looked at the Rembrandt and you go, "I'm going to walk myself through this." That's how Hunter
Mhm.
Thompson claims he got to be a great writer, is he just
Right.
typed The Great Gatsby out. And
Yeah.
even someone at your college, James Benning, the
Uh-huh.
great experimental filmmaker, he just copied outsider art paintings. He just
Mhm.
said, "I'm going to copy this to get that." So I'm
Mhm.
curious, just briefly, where you think you got it, like in your DNA. But here's the real question. You can blend it. Is a screenwriting teacher told me great art or great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite.
Mm.
Great art or great film is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. So, what role does intention play in your creative process?
Okay. Um, I, th- for me, making a painting is about, hmm, I feel like I'm tapping into memories. And as I'm painting, sometimes the way the paint goes over, because I use a glazing technique very similar to Rembrandt and Leonardo and Caravaggio. And so as I'm painting these glazes, the combination of one color over another creates a third color that sometimes I'm not even anticipating. And what it does, it triggers memories for me. And it's almost like an onion. When you begin peeling an onion, you just go deeper and deeper and deeper to the core. And that's what happens when I make these paintings. So it becomes like I said, a very meditative process for me as I rediscover everything that I am. It's a constant rediscovery, and I think we're born with
Yeah.
everything that we need. But I think as society begins to step in, these things get often squashed out of us.
Yeah.
And I mean, any first grader loves to draw. They love to draw because they want to express themselves. We have a need to express, a need to, and I always tell people, if you're making a painting or you're dancing or you're singing, it's all a form of communication.
Yeah.
You wanting to commune. So what is it
But
you're saying?
but Shane, that was beautiful. Where did you get this from, your theory? Where did you, because I mean, you're an alchemist then, because alchemy is take two known things and you come up with a third unknown thing. So you're like
Yes.
taking two memories, you blend it together and you come up with one of your paintings.
Yes.
And so I mean, you can put all this into words, but we started by saying, sometimes you can't verbalize with spoken word. what's going on. That you were constantly doing something amazing at the beginning of this. You're still doing it. Is you do your paint gesture as you're talking.
Yes.
You're doing this. And people do this normally. They use their hands, but you actually, it's almost like a basketball player just doing this all the time. You're
Yeah.
doing. But I mean, just do you know where it came from in you? Is it your DNA? Is it some you were?
I think so. Yeah, I think it is.
You mean it's
You know,
more in the DNA from your mom and dad than it is how they raised you? It's a little more in the DNA, or is it both? Or
I think that I think it's a combination, and I think the landscape of where I grew up is a big part of that. This area, it's a very flat farmland, and so there's this infinite horizon that I can see all the time. When I first moved to New York, I had like this major identity crisis, because I couldn't find a horizon line to rest my.
Is the
You know what I
horizon
mean?
line the same as a vanishing point?
Yes. Yes. So there's that. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think it's amazing, but it's still easily discussed because your friend you took to Europe with you didn't see it. So he grew up somewhere. I mean, you can articulate that your environment did it to you, but it still seems there's something inside you that got out through.
Yes.
Okay, maybe this question is, McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. So knife and fork extends our teeth. The shutter in a camera extends our eyelid. Like maybe religion or philosophy is an extension of consciousness. What does the paintbrush extend for you? What humanness?
That's a good one. I think it's an extension of my perceptions, how I perceive the world.
Yeah.
And by me sharing that and creating that alchemy, then it creates the opportunity for other people to share in that.
Yeah. But that's you beg all these questions perfectly. Then the next question I usually ask is, when you're painting your painting, Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. When you're painting your painting, how much are you thinking of your viewer?
I used to think a lot about the viewer. Now I don't. I've given myself a license to not be concerned about that. And over the years, some art dealers will say, God, that last painting was great. Can you make 10 more? Well, of course, that's, it's like, no, I'm not. Well, we need better, we need more of this, more of that. And I had this one art dealer who I was doing these paintings called the Geneva De Banshee. And so it's the first commissioned painting that Leonardo da Vinci did of this young woman. And the woman, it's a very small painting, and she's the painting hangs at the Smithsonian, Washington, D.C. And if you look, it's so finely painted, but there's something very odd about it, which is if you put your hand over one half of her face, you see one perspective. If you do the other, you see a different perspective. So it's almost like the beginning of Cubism. And he's wanting us to see more than what the eye can see at one moment, right? So I thought, you know what? I want to have a conversation with him, a visual dialogue. So I ended up making 52 paintings over the course of 2 years that was exploring the movement and the shapes that Leonardo had painted, and the colors and the way he applied the paint. And so, and some of the paintings were quite dark. You have this burnt umber or Van Dyke brown as a background in there, with this chiaroscuro with the light coming forth. And my then dealer said, I want you to bring some new paintings in. I'd like to see what you're working on. So I did. And he said, I'll never sell that painting. It's too dark. It's too dark. I wish you would stop making dark paintings, for God's sake. What are you trying to do here? I'm trying to help you. Make some bright colored paintings. And I just walked out. I just turned around and walked out. And, I wanted to say a lot, but I didn't. And I bit my tongue. And then about 2 weeks later, he calls. He said, "Hey, Shane, guess what? That dark painting? Well, I just sold it." I said, "Oh, really? The painting that you said you would never be able to sell?" I said, let this be a lesson for both of us. My job is to make art and your job is to sell art. So let me do my job. Let me do my job, and then you can do your job. If you tell me what to do, then I'm not doing my job. I'm doing what you think is my job, but that's not my job.
Is he? Yeah, but I shouldn't ask. But is he still your dealer?
No.
How many dealers have you had approximately in your career?
That's a good question. I don't know, 10, 12.
But is that normal? Do
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
I think so. It used to be once upon a time, during the days of a Kleinwaller, where Picasso lands with him, and then he just takes care of everything, and he would go and buy every month, and he would stop by Picasso's studio and just, I'll take that, and that. Thank you. So, they had a steady income. And then comes along like Peggy Guggenheim, and she does the same thing. And she puts Jackson Pollock on a stipend. Yeah. Well, that's crazy, right? And then Leo Castelli comes along, and he ups that ante, and he's got all his artists on stipends so that they can just make art. Well, that's a beautiful thing. That doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
The artist now has to be both the creator and the fabricator, the creator, the business person. Yeah. All those things combined.
Yeah. Yep. I don't really want to go into the art world that much, but that was sure a great lesson, Shane. That's the kind of lesson I like. You like, whoop, you told it the whole thing. You went from, Peggy on. There's a great documentary on Peggy too. And it's just an amazing thing that art is, to people like me and you, it's like our lifeblood, but it's like ugly when it gets to how it gets out to the world.
Well, it's people have asked me that too. When it's one thing when you're making a painting and it's selling for $500. It's another thing when it's selling for $5,000. It's another thing when it's selling for $50,000 on up. And so then it becomes, where is what I'm doing? Am I creating a commodity?
Yeah.
For somebody to buy and sell? Or am I creating art? And, and that was I had that struggle a number of years ago as the career started taking off. And suddenly it was like, people are buying these things as a commodity.
Yeah.
But to me, they're art. And I realized that as long as they're in my studio, they are art.
Yeah.
That's it. That's their function, right? Yeah. The minute they leave my studio, then they potentially are spanning commodity art or art commodification. Yeah. And then it's not until much later where it becomes art again.
Yeah. Beautiful. Two cute quotes too is Paul Schrader says, "The role of the artist is to attempt to sell out but fail." That's this purity thing. And then Al Flipside, the punk magazine that spawned everybody in LA for 30 years, he says, don't sell out, sneak in.
There you go. I like that one. That's a great one.
Yeah. I asked Mike Kelly all these questions twice over a 10-year period. And I went to college with him. And it's amazing because he was that kind of artist who came out of Cal Arts, who wasn't
Right.
like creating commodity in a way, because all the other artists thought this guy is pure. But indeed, he could hire other artists for $1 million and create a piece of art. So it's
Yeah.
another that all that's for another podcast. I mean, I'd like to do this with Julie Rico, who I interviewed a couple weeks ago, because she goes, I don't like what I said about something about the art world and commodification. I goes, that's all right. We'll just do another podcast on that topic.
Yeah, yeah,
But
no, it's the nature of the beast, and
yeah,
there's, I mean, at Cal Arts, as there's this sort of Marxist mentality that, oh, how dare you make something that can be bought and sold? So, okay, that's fine, but if you want to do it full time, unless you come from a wealthy family,
yeah,
you've got to figure out a way to get it out the door.
yeah. It's like the big line is this, the end of this part is NFTs. You know what NFT stands for? No freaking thing. But
Yes.
here's a question I would love to ask you. And in the music world, my friend said there's the 3 T's: taste, technique, and theory. So you can learn the theory of how Rembrandt did this. You can learn the technique, how he did that. But
Mhm.
taste, how does one acquire taste? In your case, and you talked about music for a second, but I mean in art, how does one
Mhm.
acquire taste? You gravitated towards Leonardo and Rembrandt. How does one acquire taste? And is it different from aesthetic? Is aesthetic and taste, what's the difference?
Mhm. That's interesting. Aesthetic versus taste. Taste is something I think that's acquired. You
But how?
acquire a certain.
How did you acquire your taste for Rembrandt and Leonardo?
Um, Standing in front, I've seen almost every Rembrandt in the world that's in a public collection. And walking into a room of, 100 paintings and seeing Rembrandt without looking at the tag, it just popped out. It always pops out. And so it's like he has some sort of magic ingredient, that just shines past everybody. And to me, you talk about alchemy, and I always, as a kid, I thought, these artists in the little books that I had, I thought these artists are magicians because they're turning, they're making a new reality out of nothing. They're making something out of nothing. And then there was a Hallmark store in town, and they had a little stand of Grumbacher paints. So I would sneak over there and unscrew the tops of the little Grumbacher paints and smell the paint and then rub it on my skin, you know? And it was just that linseed oil was so beautiful. That smell, it was intoxicating for me. And I thought, how do they take this and make that? That's magic. I
Yeah,
want to be a magician.
yeah,
And so I think that, somebody like Leonardo, for instance, you look at these paintings of his, he's not painting a person, he's painting an idea of a person. Rembrandt's
yeah.
painting a person, right? And they both use a very similar technique. But Leonardo's paintings are really about the human psyche from an intellectual point of view, whereas Rembrandt's paintings are about the human psyche through his observations.
Wow. So deep, dude. That's super deep. You got it. Yeah. Because I mean, you can articulate. I mean, you can't always expect an artist to articulate what they can do, because they,
Right.
and we think we, in this day and age, that's what we expect. And I appreciate this. But the point of view thing is interesting too, because McLuhan says a funny thing that I think is like a joke, but I would love to hear your take on it. He says, when when we invented the vanishing point in painting, that's when we started having point of view. And like, how did humans go, well, I like this and I dislike this? Like cave people, they pick up a radish and they go, well, I like the red part, but the green part's bitter. Well, who decided what was their point of view? Like, I prefer this taste to that taste.
Right.
Just your idea on this. How did inventing the vanishing point in paintings change humans, I guess, is the question.
Well, and I think the vanishing point is actually embedded in some of the earliest cave art.
Yeah.
It's there. So they are already acknowledging form and space, and which is an acknowledgement of time.
Yeah.
Because time is space, right? So I look at these cave paintings, for instance. I'll just digress for a second here, because if you think about going into a cave, because I've looked at these things, through books and stuff, and I thought it's very hard to just randomly sit down and do a drawing of a horse, right? From your memory. It's almost impossible. Even if you've studied drawing horses for 10 years, it's really hard to do. And I look at those cave paintings and I thought, these people studied. They studied. Wow. And I'll go even a step further, because when you make take a piece of charcoal or ochre or something and make a mark on that rough rock, you can't erase it if you make a mistake. Right? So look at these things closely, and then look at some of Banksy's work, where he does templates and spray paints, and you see the sharp edges and how they get blurry. And then look at these cave paintings again. It's right there. So yeah. I think that in some cases, for the really sophisticated ones, I think that they actually were making some preliminary drawings, if not even templates, and taking those into the caves. And then those caves, well, why would they do that? Well, number one, it's an area that's going to be protected from the elements. Number two, you're going into the earth. Number three, at that time, the God was not considered to be masculine. God was considered to be feminine, and which is why you have all these fertility sculptures, because without the woman, we die, right? So Mother Earth, as they go inside of Mother Earth to have this shamanic experience that gives their life relevance and meaning, we're still doing the same thing.
You mean they're going into the womb?
Yes. And so, and if you look at, for instance, some of the great architectural buildings that are being put up now, for the most part, go back to the 12th century, 13th century, they were the churches, the cathedrals. The last 50 years, it's been museums. Yeah. So has art and culture replaced some of the purpose of what these cathedrals used to hold for societies?
Yeah.
But I think that there's a direct line that goes all the way back to those cave paintings. We still have a need to enter into a space and experience something beautiful and profound.
Yeah. Yeah, you answered him. I always ask people what was the motive of the cave artist, not what anthropologists or Herzog said or anything. You pretty much covered it. But I have to tell you, one guy said, to keep people in the cave. But like, come on over to my cave. Now I want you to stay in here,
Yeah.
It is. But I want to throw this.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, there's not much evidence that people actually lived in those caves.
Yeah. There's
very little evidence of that. I think that they were for religious purposes. I really do. And yeah. They've also found out that in some of those drawings where there's they've done some carbon dating of the materials like the ochre and some of the original drawings, and they go back 35,000, 40,000 years. and then some of the other line drawings that are retraced over them, or that are slightly off, creating the illusion of movement, are maybe 20,000 years later.
Wow.
Oh yeah. I follow this stuff. It's kind of a hobby of mine. And so they've been doing all this carbon dating, and they realized that, wait a minute, this cave was visited for 30,000 years over a long period of time. So it's like this was a destination place. This is like the Mecca where you have to go every year, or you have to go for some ritualized purpose. Maybe it's coming of age. Maybe it's where you take somebody to, I don't know. It's fascinating. And I still think that we're wired the same way. We still have the same needs. They've been studying the vocal boxes now of some of these skeletons that they've found, that the dates match the cave paintings, and they realized that they had speech and that they probably sang.
Yeah.
So music and sound was very important to them.
Yeah, because we don't have, we just go, what about cave art? They don't go, what about cave music and what about cave dance? Because they don't have a videotape of it. And even the guy in the Herzog film, he blows the flute. Because here's a flute, but that doesn't mean they blew it that way, but it's a good, it's a legitimate.
Right.
But you talking about conceptual art, because, like I'm such a huge fan of Duchamp, because I always go, Duchamp ruined art, and it needed ruining, because every kid goes to Cal Arts. There's nobody who paints with skill. I mean, there's a few, but it's it's like, how cute can I do a regurgitation of Banksy or Warhol? And so it's like, instead of doing what you did, they go, yeah, I can just buy a de Kooning drawing and erase it. Whoever did that, let's say it again.
Right. And I understand what Bob Rauschenberg was doing, which is that he needed to erase this presence that he felt was stopping him from having a career. I get that, and that was a very brave thing for him to do. And I think it was even braver for de Kooning to give him a drawing.
To give it to him. But it's also cute. It's like, I'm a very talented eraser. I know how to erase good. Is perception reality?
That's a good one. Is perception reality? Wasn't that a Adolf Huxley? Wasn't that discussed? The doors of perception. Is perception reality? It is, in terms of our physical presence.
Yeah.
Because it is our perception that informs us of what is setting that is we are in. So does that mean that this setting is the only setting? This perception is the only perception? No, but it's what we are designed to receive.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes I sense lots of stuff around me that is not, I can't visually see, I can't measure it, but I get a sense of it. I mean, oftentimes, I would say 90% of the time, I will get like somebody will pop into my head, and somebody I may not have heard from in a long time. 10 minutes later, they call me.
Yeah.
I get that all the time.
Yeah. No, I call it ESP. I mean, you could call it whatever you want.
Yeah.
But I asked for 90 minutes. We got 7 more minutes. Can you go a little longer?
Sure.
You can, like 10 or 15, just so I can gauge it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. So,
Sure.
What's more important, conviction or compromise?
Conviction. Because without conviction, there's nothing to compromise.
But this is also like flaneur or psychogeography. The cliche is that the journey is more important than the destination. Why do we have to name or seek a destination if the journey is more important?
I think it's important to have a sense of purpose. Yeah. So the purpose is to reach your destiny, right? And without that purpose, then there's no reason to take the journey.
You've accomplished a lot, Shane. In your accomplishments, how do you rate these three elements? Luck, skill, and ambition. What would you put top, second, and third?
That's tough. I think ambition is what allows the skill and the talent to thrive. Because if you can be the most talented, creative person in the world, but if you don't have the ambition to find an audience for it, then it's invisible. And I think luck is what's that old saying? Luck is about preparation and circumstance, or something like that.
Well, it's like, it goes, the more you practice, the luckier you get.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I think, like, for instance, when I graduated from Cal Arts, I thought, I should get a job working as a studio assistant. And that way it keeps me in the art world. And so I thought about Los Angeles, and I thought about which artists are successful enough to actually hire a studio assistant. And so I picked Ed Ruscha and David Hockney, and I wrote them both a letter. I didn't hear back from either of them. But what I did was set the wheels in motion. And then I think it was about 1.5 years or 2 years later, I found myself being introduced to Ed Ruscha. And I said, did you ever get that letter I sent you? And he said, no, I didn't. And I said, well, I sent you a letter. And he said, well, what did it say? And I said, I was asking you for a job as a studio assistant. He goes, oh. Huh, yeah, no, I never got it, but why don't you give me your number?
Nice.
And he called me about I don't know, maybe a month later. Yeah.
Yep.
So is that luck? You know what I mean? I don't think that's luck. I think that is me sending out. Yeah, exactly.
You manifested it. And also, you had to have what we talked about, the aesthetic or the taste, to pick those two guys. I mean, you could have picked 10 or 12 more, and your chances would have been big. So a couple of my film heroes, George Manupelli says, ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says, there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. We've sort of already touched on this, but I got to ask it anyways. I know it's both and it depends. But is art making more self-expression, or more you're a vehicle for whatever technology or culture is dominant?
I feel that the self-expression is what allows me to become the vehicle.
Yeah.
And that when I'm really, really in the creative zone, it just flows through me. And the best, and sometimes, to be talking to somebody in the evening, this one friend of mine, he's a private art dealer, and he would say, how was your day in the studio? And I say, you know what? I was able to dip my toes into the pond of the universe.
Can art making be egoless?
No, I don't think so. But I think that it's important to have a healthy ego. And I also think, if you think that you can't make a bad work of art, then you don't have a healthy ego.
Yeah.
And I'm probably my own worst critic with my work. And throughout the day, it's like, I feel like there are these, I always like to say, you have to learn how to dance with your demons before they dance with you.
Yeah.
The demons are always going to be there. They don't go away. But if I ignore them, I just give them more power.
Oh, don't ignore them. That's good.
Well, don't ignore them. I acknowledge that they're there, and I then say, okay, I'm having a moment of doubt. I then say, I get to choose what I do next. So instead of going down a rabbit hole of self-doubt and all these other things, I will often just change my setting. I remove myself from the situation, and maybe I go for a walk, or I just go do something else. And then because you realize that sometimes your mind gets so fixated on a particular thing that you can't see anymore.
Yeah.
And that happens when I'm painting, especially the still point paintings, and they're big 6 by 9 foot paintings with thousands and thousands of tiny little lines. And when I do these paintings, I'm moving, this fast or this slowly. And the movement is about the radius that my arm can go, right? And so if you do that over and over and over again, with the idea that at the center of this painting is a gravitational force that's pulling me towards the center and looping me back out again. And it's a moment of pure chaos, but out of chaos comes order as I go into it over and over. And these moments of time overlap, creating a web of sorts. And then after 4 or 5 hours of doing this, suddenly I can't see it anymore. It's like I go snowblind. So I have to just go for a walk.
Yeah. Well, it led perfect into this. There's a line that goes, "You create what you resist." The comedian Bob Goldthwait morphed it into, "You are what you hate." James Joyce said, "It's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve." And Buñuel nailed it. Buñuel said, "Thank God I'm an atheist." So you sort of touched on this just now with the line about dancing with your demons. Is how do you react to this line? You create what you resist. I'm not saying you, Shane, but one creates what one resists. How do you react to that line?
Well, that's interesting. I'm not quite sure how to address that one. Because, I do dance with my demons, but that allows me to lead the dance. And if I'm not leading the dance, then I'm following. And that could be treacherous and dangerous, I think, for the human soul. So the thing that we fear the most is, often, and I think this is true, I've watched people do this, where the thing this one person feared the most is what they manifested in their lives over and over again. But I think that they manifested it because they wouldn't acknowledge that it was a fear.
Yeah. Yeah, these guys like Zapp and Buñuel, they couldn't create their art without being raised Roman Catholic. It's like so much a part of them.
Right.
And they want to say, it's just like Joyce saying, "I disbelieve." It's like, yeah. Anyways, Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than to overcome a weakness. Right. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Fear of public speaking. And also, I did study Feldenkrais, and I did, yes. And I did those exercises, but it was part of an acting class. And I had such an incredible fear of speaking in public that I would almost pass out. I'd just break out in a cold sweat. So I realized I had to hit this thing head on. And so I started studying acting and doing scene work to get over it, to where I got comfortable in exposing myself emotionally.
How do you find peace of mind? Oh, go ahead.
So anyway, but Feldenkrais was part of the, we would do Feldenkrais for about 30 minutes before the class, before the thing started, and it was about getting in touch with yourself and finding, I've got a pain here. Where is that? Why is that pain there? What did I do? How do I move that pain into another part of my body? And it was being used in acting so that, for instance, let's say you have a bum leg, you know, and it creates a limp in the character. Well, why does this character have this limp?
Yeah.
You know, what happened? And anyway, it was really interesting. And it's really about, you know, learning how to feel your feelings and think your thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the bottom line is, how do you turn a breakdown into a breakthrough? How do you turn a rejection into a redirection, you know?
Yeah.
But you've been
Yes.
really generous. You've been really generous with your time. I just have a few more. If you were
Okay.
walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Don't be afraid.
Yeah. These are 5 Alan Watts questions, just in a matter of a couple words, just off the top of your head.
Okay.
Who started it all?
Who started it all? Energy.
Are we going to make it?
Yes.
Where do we put it?
In the moment.
Who's cleaning it up?
We are.
Is it
We are.
serious?
What's that?
Is it serious?
It's always serious. Yes.
Just a couple more, Shane. That's been amazing. Yeah, I know what these interviews work when either I tear up or they tear up, and that was pretty heavy on those Alan Watts. You got those tears flowing for me, so I appreciate that.
I love Alan Watts. He's great.
Yeah. Joseph Boyce said, "Make the secrets productive." Lou Welsh said, "Guard the secrets, constantly reveal them." But it was Thornton Wilder in 28. He said, "Art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time." You've laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. And indeed, you have answered this already. But what's it really all about for you?
Learning these paintings, when I paint it, what it does, it allows me to be in the now.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. You know, Ram Dass saying, "Be here now," this whole idea. And both Zappa and Joyce said, all times are happening now.
Exactly.
But we're still, you know, even though we've done live TV for 90 minutes, it's about to end. And I don't want it to end. I hope we can talk forever.
Yes,
So
for sure.
maybe we can do another podcast someday and talk about art in other aspects of art, or
Absolutely.
fruit tree growing.
Yeah, I planted 350 Cabernet Sauvignon vines, and so next year I'll be making wine.
Yeah.
It's something. Yeah, it's something I always wanted to do, and I thought, well, if you want to do it, then do it. Don't wait for permission.
Yeah.
Just
No,
do it.
the little film is really thorough that Eric made on you, because it
Yeah.
covers some of these different aspects: the birds, the plants, and the paint. Okay, just 2 more. Thank you so much. What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
That's a good one. I think there's, when I first got my computer, the first computer I got, and I went online, the World Wide Web, I realized that the screen was really a portal into a fourth dimension.
Yeah.
And that what I was witnessing was a collective conscious and subconscious of the human race.
Yeah.
And that was both frightening and exhilarating. And I think right now, the novelty of it is certainly wearing off. And it's being, used for good and bad. And I think that it has become a microcosm of the macro, of the human race. So as we sort through what's real and what's not real, and we can blame social media and we can blame the internet and technology for leading us astray, I think that ultimately it's a thing that's going to help us find our way again.
Yeah, it's pure McLuhan, because he said everything we invent has services and disservices. You go,
Yeah.
oh, I hate drones. They're killing people. It's like Laurie Anderson uses drones in her concerts. So,
Right.
we don't want drones to kill people. So flip
No.
it and use it another way. But, I mean, you go to Einstein, you explained earlier, I mean, he invents that. He goes into atomic energy. So
Right.
the thing is, how do we cope with it? It's
Right.
like, how do we?
And exactly, and he was sorry. He wrote a letter to his daughter, or son, I think it was his daughter, at the end of his life, and a friend of mine shared it with me recently, and I'd never read it before, and it was just so profound, because he was saying that I've created this, I discovered this formula or this equation that basically unlocks the powers of the universe, but there's one power that's even stronger, and that's love.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty amazing, because my first question, it goes full circle, because I'm going to ask you the last question now. The first question is, what's the best thing for a human being? I mean, 90% of everybody asks is love. I goes, okay.
Right.
And it's there, there's no right or wrong answers. It's just to throw out. So the last question is, what gives you the most optimism?
The most optimism is when I see people becoming aware.
Yeah.
Not on big things necessarily, but little things. And I think that many years ago, I was at a party in Hollywood, up in the Hollywood Hills, and this woman, I was introduced to this woman. She was a big talent agent or something, and she knew of my work, and she was happy to meet me, and I said, thank you. And then she said, yes, I just got back from Arles, France, because Van Gogh is my favorite artist. And I said, oh, how was it? She goes, just amazing. The landscape was amazing. And I felt like I was there walking where he walked. And I said, you were, but let me ask you a question. Did you drive or take a train? How did you get there? And I think she drove or something. And I said, so the trees along the way, were they the same trees as in the town of Arles, France? And she goes, I'm not sure. And I said, they're pretty much the same trees. And
Wow.
and I started asking her very specific questions. And the reality was to her, and I said to her, I said, this is really interesting, because Van Gogh changed the way you see.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah.
And I said, that's the power of art. A great work of art can change the way we see and the way we think about ourselves and about the world.
Yeah.
So how do we implement change? That's one way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. It's like that whole line about seeing the world with new eyes, because it goes, you brought up people, because the first question is, what's the best thing for a human being? And your answer was engaging with people and this relationship of humans. And they asked, and I got that from Wilhelm Reich, who said, what's the best thing for a human being? He said, another human being or other people. And then the last question is one of the last questions they asked Groucho Marx is, what gives you the most optimism? And he said, other people.
There you go.
So it's been a true enlightening experience, Jane.
Oh, thank you.
So
Thank you very much. It's been great.
I really
Pleasure.
loved it, and I appreciate your time. I'm going to hit the end button, but again, I
Okay.
hope it never ends. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.